The peculiarity of the social and economic organization of the West today is that human beings have abdicated control over their economic lives to a system which, by its very nature, is uncontrollable. That peculiar institution is the world market. And if that system can be said to have a center, then it's here, in New York City. In 1776, at the time of the American Declaration of Independence, this was a pleasant little farm on the boundary of New York City. Today, it's been overwhelmed by the growth of New York, a growth which has coincided with the growth of the modern world trading system. Our world system of trade has existed for centuries, but the modern system in which production is organized on a world scale was a British invention. The development of manufacturing industry demanded a new trading relationship. Industry needs markets, and industry needs raw materials. So manufacturing is characterized by a complex international division of labor, in which a world system of production and distribution is bound together in an interdependent whole. Now, the industrialization of Britain required markets. Free trade was the key. Once some troublesome competitors, such as India, had been effectively eliminated, free trade opened up the markets for those products which only Britain could now produce. So free trade was in Britain's best interests. But the economic case for free trade was presented in less chauvinistic terms. As is the case with all economists' arguments designed to overwhelm the unconvinced, the British case for free trade was that free trade would be in the best interests of all countries. Ricardo had shown that each country should produce only those goods in which it had a relative or comparative advantage. If all did this, then all would be better off, and free trade would enforce this desirable outcome. But what determines the relative advantages of different countries? Modern economists argue that relative advantages stem from differences in resources. So a land-abundant country like, say, the United States should export land-intensive goods, and a labor-abundant country like, say, India should export labor-intensive goods, and so on. But then the argument is extended to manufacturing industry. So the advanced industrial countries should export manufactured goods, and third world countries should be content to specialize in the export of raw materials in which they are said to have a comparative advantage. So runs the modern free trade argument. There's clearly something very wrong with this argument. Manufacturing capacity is not a natural resource, it must be built up. The third world does not lack resources, but it does lack manufacturing industry and all the dynamic benefits that manufacturing brings. At the end of the Second World War, Japan was still very much a non-industrial country. Her large population was engaged in agriculture and low-technology industries. American economists advised the Japanese to invest in labor-intensive industries in which Japan had a comparative advantage. The Japanese did exactly the opposite and invested in those industries in which they had no apparent advantage, the capital-intensive industries. As the Vice Minister for International Trade and Industry, Yoshihisa Ojimi, later argued, if the Japanese economy had adopted the simple doctrine of free trade, it would almost permanently have been unable to break away from the Asian pattern of stagnation and poverty.
At the end of the World War II, many people had an opinion that Japan should concentrate on labor-intensive industries, that is the light manufacturing industries, since Japan was Japan was poor in natural resources and capital, but abundant in labor. But Japan did not buy this idea. Instead, Japan decided to build highly capital-intensive the modern industries, which were conducive to scale economies.
The Yamaha company, famous today for its motorcycles, was founded as an instrument manufacturer towards the end of the 19th century. Indeed, its pianos won a prize at the Paris exhibition of 1904. After the end of the Second World War, there was an explosion of interest in Western music in Japan, and a consequent rapid growth of demand for Western musical instruments. This demand Yamaha supplied. Then in the 1950s, Yamaha achieved a crucial technological breakthrough in the production of light metallic alloys, which gave them a great advantage in markets for wind instruments and for motorcycles. It was from this platform of a rapidly growing demand for instruments and for motorcycles that Yamaha then went out and sold to the world. And now Yamaha sells organs, motorcycles, guitars, wind instruments, archery equipment, skis, tennis rackets, and pianos. Japan, by concentrating production in those lines for which demand was expected to grow rapidly, locked its manufacturing sector into a virtuous circle of cumulative causation. America, which grew slowly, teetered on the brink of a vicious circle. It's our principle of cumulative causation, rather than the static ideas of comparative advantage, that provides the key to understanding the structure and development of trade in manufactures. The self-reinforcing dynamic of industrial expansion will ensure that competitive strength is maintained and enhanced. In the longer run, the location of competitive strength may be changed by new institutional developments or the rise of new competing nations. But fundamentally, the market system works to strengthen the competitive position of the successful and to weaken the position of the unsuccessful. So successful countries will tend to increasingly dominate trade, whilst unsuccessful countries steadily decline. It's at this international level that cumulative effects are at their most powerful, for strength and weakness in manufacturing is reflected in strength and weakness in the balance of payments. The balance of payments account lists all the transactions between a country and the rest of the world. Current transactions cover the purchase and sale of all goods and services, ranging from raw materials to motor cars to machines to tourist services. And capital transactions cover flows of investment funds, ranging from purchases of factories to purchases of shares and bonds that can be bought one day and sold the next.
What's your sixes? I'll do 10 million marks, sir. Okay. Thank you. Have you got a name for me? Right, okay, fine.
All these purchases and sales involve transactions in foreign currencies, and the orders to buy and sell foreign exchange pass through the dealing rooms of the banks, like this one. The final balance of all the transactions is the amount that a country owes or is owed by others. Suppose there's a net balance owed to German citizens. Then payment must be made in Deutschmarks. So to pay off the debt, a country can either draw on its reserves of Deutschmarks, or more usually, it will borrow. It can borrow from German banks, the German government, or from some third party, such as an American bank that has Deutschmarks to lend. If the balance of payments fluctuates from year to year around zero, then these periods of borrowing will be balanced out by periods of lending, and the whole system is reasonably stable. But if there's a tendency for a country always, say, to be in deficit, to always be a borrower from the rest of the world, then something must be done. Debt cannot be accumulated indefinitely. Ultimately, the creditors will be unwilling to lend more to a delinquent borrower, and the borrower country will only be able to buy on international markets what it pays for directly from its exports. So countries with a persistent balance of payments deficit will find their freedom of maneuver in economic affairs severely restricted. National policies will be dictated by international imperatives, with potentially dangerous consequences for employment and growth. How then can a persistent tendency to deficit be eliminated? On the side of capital account, action can be taken to stop the flow of capital out of Britain. But cutting foreign investment has its limits. Some foreign investment is directly related to trade, setting up dealerships here in New York, for example, and cutting foreign investment would harm exports. So although some action can be taken to stop the wasteful outflow of investment funds, ultimately it's the current account that matters. Action must be taken to cut imports and encourage exports. A traditional remedy is devaluation.
From now on, the pound abroad is worth 14% or so less in terms of other currencies. That doesn't mean, of course, that the pound here in Britain, in your pocket or purse or in your bank, has been devalued. What it does mean is that we shall now be able to sell more goods abroad on a competitive basis. This is a tremendous opportunity for all our exporters and for many who have not yet started to sell their goods overseas. But it will also mean that the goods we buy from abroad will be dearer. And so for many of these goods, it will be cheaper to buy British.
Unfortunately, things don't work quite so smoothly. Rising import prices mean that workers, even in a cut-price store like this, face higher food prices and higher prices for household goods. And companies face higher costs of production due to rising costs of imported materials and imported machines. So the workers demand higher money wages to maintain their spending power, and the companies push up prices to maintain their profits. Soon, all the competitive advantage derived from the devaluation is lost. Another devaluation is required. This causes more inflation, requiring another devaluation, and so on and on and on, in an increasing upward spiral. The only way to limit the inflationary explosion is to persuade or force workers to take a cut in their living standards. So the role of incomes policies in many countries has been to keep the rate of increase of money wages below the rate of increase in prices. This reduces inflation, all right, and it cuts real incomes and therefore forces workers to spend less on imports. Moreover, competition in manufactured goods is not just a matter of price. People buy foreign cars not because they are necessarily cheaper, but because they are more reliable, of better quality. And manufacturers must buy the best machines and equipment for the job if they are to be efficient and competitive. Small devaluations will not offset these quality differences, and big devaluations are not likely to work either, since they set off inflationary spirals which wipe out any benefits. Back in Britain, closed factories, such as this one, are the effects of an alternative policy to cure payments deficits: deflation. This involves the government setting out quite deliberately to lower the level of economic activity, to create unemployment, so that people can't afford to buy imports and manufacturers don't import raw materials because the level of demand is so low. Now, this solution will work. If the government is willing to make people poor enough, say by having them unemployed, then imports will be cut and the balance of payments will be brought back into balance. But it will be a hollow victory. Low demand will force companies to reduce manufacturing capacity, to cut investment, and so weaken the international competitiveness of the economy. And it's at this international level that the underlying problems of the economy are exposed and reinforced. Neither of the market solutions, devaluation and deflation, can solve the problems of a country like Britain, whose manufacturing sector is uncompetitive. And this is why the cumulative effect is so powerful at the international level. Strong countries will always tend to be in balance of payments surplus, and so will be able to expand demand steadily without fear of an unsupportable increase in imports, and this will reinforce their competitive position. Weak countries will always tend to be in deficit, and will be forced to devalue and deflate, reinforcing their competitive weakness. Indeed, the story has a yet more cruel twist in its tale. Since one country's imports are another country's exports, one country's surplus is another country's deficit, and the total value of all countries' surpluses equals the total value of all countries' deficits. Now, if the deficit countries deflate hard to get rid of their deficits, then the surplus countries will find that their surpluses disappear, and they'll try to recover them by deflating a little. The weak countries then find their deficits reappearing and will be forced to deflate yet more. Then the strong deflate again, and so on and on. The international market system has a built-in deflationary bias, which always tends to assert itself, always tending to push the world into a depression as countries struggle to maintain balanced payments by deflation. Just a moment. Hasn't this world system worked in the past? What about the whole golden age of the market system since the Second World War, when output and trade grew faster than ever before? And what about the whole history of 19th century growth, which created the modern world? The clue to the answers to these questions may be found in the simple fact that one country's deficit is another country's surplus. Suppose one country can run a perpetual deficit, a big spender that enables everyone else to enjoy a surplus. Then the deflationary bias of the system will be overcome, and worldwide expansion is possible. The big spender must also prevent chronic surplus countries from dragging the system down. A combination of economic and political power is required. This combination was found in the 19th century in the form of Great Britain, and in the Golden Age in the form of the United States. In both these periods, these big spenders ran large deficits on capital account, which funded the deficits of others. And both possessed the economic and political clout to organize the world financial system in the way that they felt appropriate. When no big spender is available, the deflationary bias of the world system tends to take over. In the interwar years, Britain was unable, and the United States unwilling to play the role of big spender, or international world banker, if you like. And since the 60s, with the decline of the United States from its earlier preeminence, the world system has begun to display the instability in trade and finance characteristic of the 1930s. So the world market system works best when it's organized by one dominant power. That is, when it's not really a free market system. Now, if no one country can play the role of perpetual big spender to the unstable world market, why can't there be some international system of organization to discipline the world market?
Representatives of 28 countries, with Lord Halifax signing for the United Kingdom, meet in the conference room of Washington's State Department for the signing of the Bretton Woods monetary agreement.
When the Allies came to Bretton Woods in 1944 to plan the post-war economic order, the chaos of the 1930s was still fresh in their minds. John Maynard Keynes was the main intellectual influence on the conference. Keynes attempted to extend the ideas he had already developed for the management of the domestic economy to the international arena. He proposed the establishment of an international central bank, which could issue its own money, he called it Bancor, and would manage the overall level of world demand by lending to deficit countries and penalizing surplus countries with an interest charge on their surpluses. It was a challenging and radical scheme. Keynes' scheme proved far too radical, especially for the Americans. So the outcome of the meetings was a new international agency, the International Monetary Fund, with the power to lend to deficit countries, but with no effective powers to penalize surplus countries, and so manage the structure of world demand. So instead of Keynes' vision of an expansionary central bank, the International Monetary Fund, always dealing with deficit countries, has become an agency of financial discipline. In recent years, a byword for deflation. Yet it must be admitted that there was a fundamental flaw even in Keynes' plan, let alone the pale version that was eventually cobbled together. The world expansionary leader, the big spender, must have political power to enforce unpopular decisions and must be economically dominant to lead the world. An international agency cannot possibly, at least in the current scheme of things, have this sort of power, and so it's quite unreasonable to expect it to provide expansionary leadership. There is no sign of a suitable manager appearing in the next decade or so. Indeed, the remaining managerial powers of the United States are likely to diminish as its relative economic decline continues apace. The world trading system is less able to weather occasional squalls than it was, say, 20 years ago. But too often it's the squalls that are blamed, rather than the leaky boat. Some squalls have been severe. The most violent of these was the rapid rise in oil prices after 1973, which led to huge balance of payment surpluses in some, though not all, OPEC countries, mirrored by deficits in the West and in much of the Third World. The reaction of the Western countries was to deflate hard, to get rid of their deficits. Indeed, they shifted their deficits onto the Third World. It's been estimated that of the total loss in income in the 70s due to the low rate of economic growth, 20% was due to the higher oil price, and 80% was due to the deflationary policies pursued by Western governments. OPEC didn't create the recession, it just gave an unstable system a push. Further difficulties are created by the increasing sophistication and flexibility of world financial markets. These allow firms and banks to shift massive amounts of money from one country to another, causing chaos on the foreign exchanges. These factors have contributed to the instability of the world economy, but they're not the fundamental cause of that instability. Problems of world trade have been debated here at the United Nations for the last 10 years or so, the so-called North-South debate. This debate has focused on problems in trade between developed and developing countries. But these problems are dwarfed by the trading difficulties between developed countries. It's the fundamental deflationary bias of the world trading system in manufactures which is the cause of the current instability in the world economy, and which holds ominous portents for the future.
Well, this BBC book, which expands the main themes of the programme, is available from bookshops, price £4.95.